Hello everyone, my name is Corey Smith and I am one of the head adjudicators for Dance Team Union's 2018-2019 competition season. We're very excited to have you and excited to see you at our competitions. We wanted to take this opportunity at the beginning of the season to have this scoring webinar to walk through our current scoring system and explain how we developed the system, why we think that it provides the best feedback and the best results possible, and to give you the details you need to help plan your routines throughout this competition season. So without further ado, let's get started. In this webinar, we will cover three main topics. First of all, the core judging principles for Dance Team Union, the fundamentals that we considered in developing our score sheets, what they are and why. Second, we'll actually go through the individual score sheets for our sort of main competition divisions and thoroughly explain each scoring category and what we mean when we say what we say. And third, we'll have a chance to summarize and we'll let you know how to ask further questions on our scoring system. DTU's core judging principles are, first of all, that equal value should be placed upon choreography, technique, and execution. You will see on our score sheet that each of those categories is worth 30 points. The last 10 points is showmanship, which we will go into separately later. Within each of choreography, technique, and execution, there are 3 10-point captions. Each of those captions should be judged independently from the other captions. In other words, it is a core judging principle of DTU that we avoid what's called score bleed, which is when a team's strengths or weaknesses in certain areas of the score sheet are allowed to drag the scores in other areas either up or down, depending on how the judge is judging. We feel very strongly that scoring you separately by each 10-point caption and not considering the other areas of the score sheet is going to reward you for excellence in that caption. It will give you a better idea of where you stand in each caption so that you know where you need to improve and where your team is really solid. It is much clearer feedback for every team. So we're going to look at some sample score sheets that show you the difference between a scorecard that has score bleed and a DTU scorecard that has every caption judged individually to capture a team's strengths and weaknesses. And in the following examples, Team A is super innovative but has little difficulty and only average dance technique. Team B, which is also in Team A's division, has advanced dance technique, but poor spacing and many individual mistakes. And Team C is very clean, but the choreography does not surprise the viewer and lacks musicality, and the dancers don't really sell it. They display little showmanship. Next, we'll show you an example of score bleed as we normally see it in typical dance team scoring, using the 3 example teams that we gave you on the previous slide. So if you take a look at Team A on the sample score sheet, you will see that the score has bled from the weakest point, which is the technique scores. They received an 8.2 in palm motion technique, an 8 in non-palm technique, and a 7.9 in difficulty. But they did have excellent choreography, as noted on the prior slide, and yet their choreography scores here are not any higher than their technique scores. And also, the scores for all the execution are reasonably consistent with the technique scores as well. By contrast, if you look at Team B, their strongest point is technique, and this judge has allowed the fact that their technique is so strong, receiving a 9.3, a 9.4, and a 9.2, to pull up some poor execution. We noted on the previous slide that they had struggled with individual mistakes and that they'd really struggled with spacing, and those scores are lower than their technique scores, but still much higher than Team A's scores, even though A, according to our example, executed better. Now if you take a look at Team C, you'll see that the score is bleeding again from the strongest point, but this time it's bleeding from execution. We noted that they were super clean in our example, and the scores reflect that. They received a 9.3 in uniformity, a 9.4 in execution of spacing and transitions, and a 9.2 in musicality and rhythm of execution. However, we noted that their choreography was not very strong in our example, and yet you'll see that they still received higher choreography scores than either of the other teams, including Team A, who we said had exceptional choreography. So these are all examples of what you might see at many dance team competitions where the judging panel has an issue with score bleed. In our experience looking at judging at many competitions, scores rarely bleed from choreography. Generally speaking, many judges tend to focus on technique and or execution based on sort of their personal preferences, and they let those impressions sort of drag up or drag down teams that have maybe excelled or were weak in the other areas of the score sheet that they're not as focused on. So now we'll turn to an example of these same teams, the same strengths and weaknesses, but showing it under the DTU model scoring system. So under the DTU scoring system, you will see that Team A has been rewarded for having strong choreography, even though they didn't have very strong technique and had average to above average execution. By the same token, Team B is rewarded for having excellent technique. They got a 9.4, 9.5, and 9.3 for their technique scores. But their uniformity of movement score, which is where we reflect individual mistakes, is much lower, as is their spacing score. And then you look at Team C, and Team C, under this example of DTU scoring, has great scores in uniformity and execution of spacing, but fairly low scores, below average scores in choreography, where we said that maybe the choreography wasn't as strong. So as you'll notice, it doesn't necessarily change the final results in terms of rankings so much, but it definitely gives the teams, when they look at their scores, a much better idea immediately of where their strengths and weaknesses lie. And it also rewards teams for doing really well in captions in which they deserve to do really well. Like for example, here, Team A has the highest choreography scores. So when they come home from this competition, they'll be able to say, we won over teams B and C in choreography, but we really need to improve our technique. And meanwhile, Team B realizes that although they excel in technique, maybe they need to spend some more time working on the execution scores. And, Team C, by the same token, can look and see, wow, we were really clean, but the judges didn't think we had great musicality, and also thought maybe we needed to bump up our choreography. So we think that this is an excellent way to help teams improve throughout the season, and also just a fairer way of judging, where teams are rewarded for excelling in the areas in which they excel and are judged fairly and honestly in areas in which they need to improve. We do believe, though, that because so many competitions have score bleed issues, that many coaches, if not most coaches, they get really comfortable seeing the score bleed. You'll notice on the score bleed slide that the range between the highest score and the lowest score that each team received was not that great. And here, the range is much larger. Team A on the low end has a couple of 7.2s, on the high end has a couple of 9.1s. Team B has up to a 9.5 and then a low of an 8. And Team C has a high all the way up to 9.7 because they executed flawlessly or nearly flawlessly, but a low of 7.9 in visual effects. So we think that judges or coaches sometimes get uncomfortable seeing a range of scores because you're so used to seeing score bleed and seeing judges sort of, let scores in one category influence their scores in another category that you're just not used to seeing it this way. But we think that this is a better way. We think this is the future, and this is the way that we think competitions should be judged. And this is how we're choosing to manage our scoring at our competitions. We hope that you will agree once you attend our competitions that this really provides you with the best feedback possible, which is what DTU is striving for. Now we're going to go back to some of DTU's core judging principles, having looked at a sample score sheet. You'll notice, as we went over on the prior slide, that the focus of DTU is not only on the scores themselves, but also on accurately ranking the competing teams in each individual caption. Because how you do in each caption of the score sheet, all of those 10-point captions, is in itself important feedback to your team about where you stand in each area. In furtherance of trying to avoid score bleed, the judges do not total their own scores. There isn't even anywhere for them to do it on the computer screen where they're scoring. Instead, they just track their scores given in each caption to assist them with accurately ranking teams within each individual 10-point caption. You'll also notice at DTU competitions that judges use a range of scores. Unofficially, we would normally ask our judges to stay within a range of 6 to 10 points per caption. It is up to the individual judge what score they give, but we do provide them some guidance to try to allow some consistency. New in 2019, we have changed the description of the final 10-point caption on our score sheet. It used to be called crowd appeal. We have chosen to move crowd appeal to be part of the choreography score, because we think that mostly crowd appeal sort of stems from choreography. It's part of the creativity and the musicality and the visual impact of the routine. And we want to reward the individual dancers and the dancers as a team for their showmanship. So it becomes, instead of another 10 points essentially being choreography, it becomes 10 points that really are about how well the dancers communicated the dance and how well they performed it. Now I want to spend a minute within our core judging principles discussion on the other component that we haven't mentioned yet at DTU competitions, which is that we do video feedback. So after each competition, you will receive every judge talking over a video of your performance. We think this is a step above just an audio feedback because it allows you to see what they're talking about at the moment that they're talking about it. It really allows you to see what they're seeing while it's going on the floor. We've trained our judges on certain core principles with respect to the video judging. First of all, we encourage our judges to provide equal feedback on all captions, including choreography. And we encourage them to give positive feedback, but also constructive feedback. And especially constructive feedback earlier in the season when coaches really just want to know, what do we need to do to make this a competition-ready dance? What do we need to do to make this a championship dance? We also encourage our judges to use specific examples. Judges should give reasons for all feedback and not simply say, I love this, or your technique needs work. We encourage them to be much more specific when they're reacting to the dance so that you can actually use the feedback to make improvements. We also actively review both the video feedback that our judges give and also their scoring. So we analyze their scoring at the end of each competition, and we listen to a sampling of their video feedback, and then we provide our judges feedback on how they did at that competition. We always want to continue to sort of hone our judges' expertise in using the DTU scoring system and in really applying our core judging principles. And so we provide them feedback just like they provide your team feedback. And as I said, I just want to say one more time, we focus on avoiding score bleed, which is when a judge basically falls in love with a team in one or more aspects and allows that emotion basically to pull up scores in other captions of the score sheet where maybe they shouldn't be pulled up. A final core judging principle of DTU is transparency. When we talk about transparency, we really mean transparency in our expectations, being clear with teams what we want and what we're looking for early in the season. Also, transparency in scoring and transparency in feedback. So at a DTU competition, coaches and judges at the end of the competition will receive a detailed scoring summary showing every score and ranking in every caption given by every judge during the competition. So not only will you get to see what every judge gave your team in summary format, but you will be able to see what every judge gave every team in the entire competition. So you can, notice judging trends, see how your team compared, etc. Additionally, the video critiques and detailed scoring feedback are available to coaches between preliminary and final rounds at national competitions. Very importantly, especially for transparency and expectations, is that there are no secret trends that we're looking for at DTU. Maybe that only certain teams, our best customers know about, and there's no secret formula for winning. We disclose our score sheets to you. We have this webinar that tells you a little bit more about the detail of what each caption means, and that's really it. So you're free to purchase your uniforms and products from any company you want. You can hire whoever you want to do your music or your choreography. We really just point you to the score sheet and try to openly and honestly tell you to focus your energy there. We're going to go through in detail in a minute exactly what's on the score sheets and what we mean when we use certain words on the score sheets. As long as you follow that, you should be great going into the season. Don't worry about there being anything happening behind the scenes that you don't know about. Now we've moved on from the core judging principles of Dance Team Union, and we're going to get into the individual score sheets for the different categories, beginning with POM. Before we do that, I want to go over a few detailed notes about the score sheets that we're going to go through. First of all, we credit difficulty as a component of technique. So at some competitions, you see difficulty as part of the choreography score. We really think that it belongs in the technique score because, it's part of determining whether you have good technique is what are you trying to do? Are you trying hard skills? Are you trying easy skills? And then how well did you do those skills? You'll also note, and you'll see this as we go through the individual score sheets, that we really focus our judges on crediting attempted difficulty, regardless of the quality of execution. However, the execution does matter because we have a whole 30-point caption after that covers execution. So we want to reward teams for trying hard skills while still separately evaluating how well they executed those skills. Also note that we don't have a required deduction for inappropriateness. We certainly don't encourage teams to do something inappropriate, but we really leave that up to each judge to determine for him or herself what is inappropriate. And even then, it's supposed to be specifically limited to a deduction within the choreography caption. We look at two different types of musicality. When we get into the individual score sheets, you're going to see musicality mentioned twice. But these are two completely different concepts. I want to take a minute and go over what we mean when we say these things. So first of all, you'll see that musicality comes up as part of our choreography score. What we mean when we talk about musicality of choreography is, does the choreography go with the music? Does it pick up unique musical cues of that particular song? Or is this team doing a dance that you could put on any music to and do that dance? We want to see if the choreographer really focused on tailoring the choreography to this specific piece of music. So that's the musicality of choreography score. On the flip side, you will also see musicality within the execution score. And what we mean by musicality of execution is completely different. Musicality of execution goes to the team's performance of the dance. Is the team dancing the choreography, whatever it is, on the appropriate musical cues and with attention to musical interpretation? Sometimes, if you pay attention, you might actually see a team that has spent a lot of time doing its routine with counts and maybe not so much time doing it with the music. And you'll notice this because the team is completely together and synchronized, but they are not dancing on the music. They're not picking up musical cues. They're not picking up nuanced musical interpretation. So we want to reward execution of the dance that not only is clean, but also takes into account, the fact that the dancers understand the music. One more note specifically about hip hop before we move to the first score sheet, which is POM, is that in hip hop, we do not have a specific style in mind. It just needs to be hip hop. There are many different hip hop styles out there. We do not have a preferred style, nor do we require tricks. We will judge how well you do whatever you choose to do in the routine. So whatever style or styles of hip hop you bring, we will judge those. And whatever tricks you choose to put in your routine, we will judge those based on what you do and how well you do it. But we don't have any requirements on the score sheet or off. Although these two different types of musicality are judged separately from one another, it's important to note that if the choreography doesn't have good musicality, it doesn't really fit with the music, it will be challenging for your team to receive a good score in musicality of execution, because it will be difficult or impossible for the judges to tell where the choreography was supposed to go. So even though we judge them separately and they're described separately and we consider them separate, they do relate to each other, and it will definitely help your team excel in both of them if you start with really focusing on musicality of your choreography. Without further ado, let's jump into the first detailed score sheet, which is POM. We call choreography artistry on DTU's score sheets. We consider those terms interchangeable. And as I said previously, choreography or artistry is worth 30 points. It is 3 10-point captions. First, we are looking for artistry, creativity, and originality. And we're really looking for, did your team have a unique idea, unique design, including costuming, and or unique staging and formation changes? We're looking for all of those things. We're looking for unpredictability and variety of movement. Is this the same dance that maybe we've seen 100 times? Or is this something where, something unexpected happened, or where we didn't know what was going to happen next? We're also looking for you to bring your signature style. We ask you to include signature moves unique to your team only. So we really want teams to focus on being themselves and discovering their own unique voice. We want to challenge you in this caption to bring something that we haven't seen before, and that is unique to your team and really speaks to your team's strengths. The second caption in artistry is visual effect of group movement. This is somewhat unique to the POM category because visuals are very important. So you should have formations and transitions, ripples, levels, and other movements that are purposefully visual and create a group picture. The visual effect should not be just incidental to the fact that you're holding palms. We want to see purposeful choreography that creates visual effect. Finally, in the artistry caption, we are scoring you based on your movement and visual design and how well they complement the music. So this is what I described in an earlier slide as musicality. So does the choreography clearly connect to the music? And that's both in the big picture and also in the small details. So do the individual dancers' movements connect to the music? And also, when you look at the whole dance in the big picture, the whole team at the same time, is there a connection to the music? Or could this be an 8 count or a dance or a section of a dance to any song? We're also looking for you to utilize tempo variations, vocal and or musical interpretations that are designed to complement the song. Again, just more of an explanation of musicality. Utilization of overall visual design and staging, including costuming as interpretation of the music. And as we discussed on a previous slide, this is where we would ask judges that if they found something inappropriate, music, movement, or costuming, they should credit all of these other factors that we just went through And then they could consider an individual deduction for inappropriateness. We try to keep that limited, but obviously, this is still a dance team competition and you're representing your studio or your all-star team or your school. And we do encourage you to, pay attention to appropriateness when designing your choreography. Next, we're going to move on to the technique caption of the POM score sheet, which is also worth 30 points. First, we are looking strictly at POM motion technique, 10 points. Are your arm motions performed with proper technique, considering placement, control, and strength of motions? This is a separate caption from the one below, which is technique displayed in everything else. Technique displayed in non-POM movements. So that's a question of everything that you do in the routine that isn't a POM motion, how is that executed, and is that executed with correct technique? So that means that if you choose to include technical jazz, kick, or hip hop movements in your routine, as well as, transition movements, carriage, posture, and balance, look at all of those things and determine whether those things were executed in a technically correct manner. The reason why we split these two up is because we believe that POM motions should be credited. It's the POM category. Motion technique is a very important part of the dance. However, we also want to see proper technique in the rest of your body that's not POM motions also being credited equally. So we try to account for both. Notice that this does not require you to do any technical jazz, kick, or hip hop movements. It just evaluates you on the quality of the technique of what you choose to do. Then, as I noted in a prior slide, the final component of our technique score is 10 points for overall difficulty. So this is where, regardless of the quality of the execution, we credit attempted difficulty. We credit difficulty in the POM motions. How fast are they? How intricate are they? Or are they very basic? We credit the technical demand of jazz, kick, and hip hop movements that you do, if any. And also the speed and intricacy of your transitions and footwork. Are the transitions, seamless and difficult, or are the transitions, walky and take a full 8 count, as an example. And again, we credit difficulty separately from execution. So even if the execution, which we'll get to in a minute, is poor, if you attempted difficulty, you should get credit under this caption for the attempt. Now we'll move on to the execution caption in the POM score sheet. Execution is worth 30 points. First 10 points are uniformity of movement, consistent uniform placement of the entire body by the entire team, considering individual mistakes. So there's no required deduction for major errors, whether it's a drop palm or fall or just other smaller individual errors. We just ask the judge in this 10-point caption to consider how clean the routine is as a whole, taking into account any individual mistakes. The next 10 points are for execution of spacing and transitions. So, did you have uniform spacing throughout the entire routine? And how smoothly did you execute your transitions? Finally, the last 10 points is musicality and rhythm of execution. We talked about this previously when explaining the difference between musicality of choreography and here, musicality of execution. So how musically did the team execute with the choreography? How well do they capture the nuances of vocal and or musical cues and tempo variations? So, does this team understand its music? Are things performed in the right place and on the right cues in the music? Or do they appear to maybe have spent a lot of time counting and not very much time with their music? Our final 10 points on the POM score sheet is for showmanship, communication and projection by the dancers. So how well do the dancers connect with the audience and provoke an appropriate emotional response? And does the performance have authenticity? So, just want to make a note on the appropriate emotional response. That is not trying to convey that we think that for POM that there's any one right style of music to use, or one right, it doesn't have to be necessarily smiley or to a certain kind of music, but whatever music, whatever style of choreography the team chooses to perform, the showmanship should be appropriate for that style of choreography and that style of music. Just wanted to make that clear. Now we're going to move to our jazz score sheet. This will go a little more quickly because in many cases, the jazz score sheet has the same explanation as the POM score sheet. So we will focus on refreshing your memories for each of these captions and noting where things are different between POM and jazz. So first of all, in jazz artistry, you will note that the descriptions of each of the captions in artistry for jazz are the same as the ones for POM. So we're looking for 10 points for artistry, creativity, and originality, 10 points for visual effect of group movement, 10 points for movement and visual design complementing the music. So what you should take away from this in jazz is that we still think that bringing a signature style and showing us something that's not predictable and that is unique to your team is very important. We still find that visual effect of group movement, utilizing different levels, different ripples, different other movements that are purposely visual is important in jazz. And we clearly see and find that musicality is key in jazz as well. It's important to note that musicality under the movement and visual design complement the music score is really focused on how the routine's design, both in the big picture and in the details, complements and goes with and enhances the audience's experience with the music. Moving on to the technique score for jazz. We are first looking for technique displayed in jazz movements. So is the team properly executing all leaps, extensions, and turns that they do in the routine? Separately, we are crediting the technique displayed in everything else in the routine that is not leaps, extensions, and turns. Technique displayed in non-jazz movements. This would certainly include your carriage and posture as a team throughout the routine, your quality of your balance and footwork, and quality of your transition movement. And finally, we are crediting overall difficulty. So how difficult were the leaps, extensions, and turns that were attempted by this team, regardless of how well it was executed? We're also looking at difficulty of the other movements, difficulty of transitions, for example. And we're looking for, this is the first example, we'll also see it in hip hop, we're looking for musical demand. What we mean by musical demand is basically the piece of music or pieces of music that your team is dancing to, how demanding is that on the dancers? How hard is it to dance to this music? So we're crediting difficulty in moving to the music, or whether it's one piece of music or multiple pieces of music that you choose for your jazz routine. And we're looking at the speed and intricacy of transitions and footwork. And we're looking at all of these items regardless of the quality of execution. Visual errors. Secondly, we're looking for execution of spacing and transitions. And third, we're looking for musicality and rhythm of execution. Again, how well is this team dancing to this music? Do they understand their music? Are the pieces of choreography that you can tell are intended to go on a certain musical cue actually being performed on that musical cue? And finally, showmanship is the last 10 points within the jazz score sheet. This is exactly the same as the POM score sheet. We're looking at the dancers' communication and projection skills, their ability to connect with the audience and provoke an appropriate emotional response. That is, whatever style of choreography they're doing and whatever piece or pieces of music have been chosen, does their showmanship appropriately connect and reflect that type of choreography and that type of music? And does the performance feel authentic? Moving now into the hip hop category. First of all, starting with 30 points for artistry. And again, this should look somewhat familiar because it is similar to the POM and Jazz score sheets. There are a couple of important differences that we included for hip hop only that I want to be sure to point out. So first, the artistry, creativity, and originality, 10 points. This is exactly the same description as you've seen for Jazz and POM. Still looking for signature moves unique to your team, unpredictability, and uniqueness. We are still looking for visual effect of group movement for 10 points. We think that visual effect is important in every category. So we're looking for levels, ripples, formations and transitions, other things that create group pictures that are interesting. Where we really diverge a little bit from POM and Jazz is in parts of this movement and visual design complement the music piece of artistry. We're still looking for choreography that clearly connects to the music. But the second bullet, note that tricks, if any, are supposed to be fully integrated into the choreography and serve to heighten the routine's theme, personality, and excitement. So let's unpack that for a minute. So the first takeaway from this is that we are not requiring any tricks. It says, if any. So you should not feel obligated to do any tricks, whether it's a lift or, something like a head spring. You should not feel obligated to do any of those things, but you may choose to do so. But if you do them, we are going to judge, are they fully integrated into the choreography? Do they enhance the routine? Do they go with whatever the personality is of this particular piece? And do they increase the excitement level of the overall routine? And then the rest of this is similar to the other POM and Jazz categories. Utilizing an overall visual design and staging, including costuming as interpretation of whatever music you choose. And then the judges may deduct here for inappropriate music, movement, or costuming only after crediting the other factors above. And they should not allow that to bleed over into any of the other scoring categories that we will see in hip hop. Next, we'll move on to hip hop technique, which is worth 30 points. The first caption is technique displayed in hip hop movements. Here we are looking for proper execution of the hip-hop style being performed, ease of movement, and the purpose and control of arms, legs, and body on your individual dancers. Very important to note here that we are not looking for any specific hip-hop style. Whatever style or styles your team chooses to bring, we will judge them on whether or not they were executed properly. Next 10 points is for difficulty of movement. Here, we're looking at the technical demand of hip-hop movements, including tricks, if any. So important to point out again that no tricks are required, but we will judge the overall difficulty of your routine, including any tricks, if you choose to add them. We'll also look for variety of movement and speed and intricacy of body movement, including head, arms, and torso, and footwork. Also note that we will tell our judges to deduct here if there is an excessive setup or recovery from any tricks that you include in the routine, and that they must consider all of the above items regardless of the quality of execution. Finally, in hip-hop technique, we look at musical demand. What we really mean by musical demand here is how difficult is it to dance to this team's selected music. So we'll listen to the piece or pieces of music that the hip-hop routine is to, and we'll make a judgment call based on tempo changes, musical nuances, lyrics and cues, and other miscellaneous demand, and think about whether this was challenging music to dance to. We'll consider these items regardless of the quality of execution. Moving on to the execution category within the hip-hop score sheet. This is exactly the same execution as we've looked at in Jazz and POM. We are crediting 10 points for uniformity of movement. Basically, how clean is your dance, considering uniform placement of the entire body by the entire team, and taking into account individual mistakes. We're giving you 10 points for executing spacing and transitions, and we're giving you 10 points for executing with good musicality and rhythm, meaning that you're capturing the nuances of vocal and or musical cues and tempo variations. And finally, moving to the final 10 points on the hip hop score sheet, which is showmanship. Similarly to the jazz and pom divisions, we're looking at communication and projection by the dancers. Are they connecting with the audience and provoking an appropriate emotional response? So whatever style of hip hop they bring to the floor, whatever style of music and movement is chosen, does their showmanship appropriately reflect that to the audience? And also looking for authentic representation of hip hop style. This is basically just the same sort of authenticity of showmanship that we covered in jazz and pom. You should not view this wording, authentic representation of hip hop style, as any view by DTU that we think there's only one style of hip hop that's really authentic. That is not what this means at all. We just want it to be a genuine feeling performance where the showmanship sort of accurately presents, the style of the dance and the style of the music. Moving on to the high kick score sheet. We'll look first at artistry, which is worth 30 points. Most of this is very similar to what you've seen in the pom, jazz, and hip hop divisions, but I will spend a little bit of time pointing out where high kick is different. So first, in artistry, creativity, and originality, it's worth 10 points. This is the same description as on the prior score sheets. So we'd like you to bring, for kick, signature moves unique to your team. We'd like you to bring a dance that is not predictable. We'd like you to bring unique ideas, design, costuming, staging, and formation changes. Next, we are crediting the visual effect of group movement. So still very important in kick is the big picture. Formations, transitions, ripples, levels, other movements that are purposefully visual. And also, and unique to high kick, we are looking for you to perform a variety of different kicks. And then we're crediting 10 points for movement and visual design that complement the music. This is the same description that you found in the pom and jazz score sheets. Hip hop was slightly different because we discussed tricks, but this is similar to pom and jazz. So choreography that clearly connects to the music, both in the big picture and also in the small details of the individual dancers' movements. We're looking for variations in tempo, vocal and or musical interpretations designed to complement the song or songs that you've selected, utilization of overall visual design, staging, including costuming as interpretation of the music. And once again, this is where one of our judges could choose to deduct for inappropriate music, movement, or costuming after crediting the other things that we list above. They should not allow that to spread to any other captions on the score sheet. Next, moving to the technique score for the high kick division. It's worth 30 points. We're first looking for technique displayed in the kicks themselves. That is worth 10 points. And what we mean by that is that the kicking and supporting leg and hips are correctly positioned, that you have a correct prep and ending position for your kicks with toes pointed, that kicks are pulled up and down, and that the team displays good body line and posture, including shoulders down and correct arm placement. In addition to the technique displayed in kicks, we are also crediting 10 points for technique displayed in non-kick movements. This should be looked at as, what technique do you have in everything in the routine that isn't a kick? So all movements used in the routine, other than kicks, are executed with correct technique, including technique displayed via carriage and posture, balance, transitions, and any technical jazz, pom, or hip-hop movements that you put in the routine. So, important to note here that we are not trying to dictate what style of music you select or what style of choreography that you do outside of obviously performing the required number of kicks, which you can find in our rules and regulations. This is really talking about, whatever you choose to do in between your kicks, we're going to judge the technique of that movement as well as the technique above in your kicks. Finally, we are crediting 10 points for the technical difficulty of the kicks. Again, similarly to the other divisions, regardless of the quality of execution. So we're looking at specifically the number and structure of your kick sequences and the height and pace of your kicks. Are they fast? Are they slow? And how does that impact the difficulty of the kicks that you've chosen to do? Moving on to execution caption within the high kick score sheet. It's worth 30 points. And this looks the same as the execution caption for the other categories that we've already discussed: pom, jazz, and hip hop. We're looking at 10 points for uniformity of movement, 10 points for execution of spacing and transitions, 10 points for musicality and rhythm of execution. And finally, wrapping up the high kick score sheet with showmanship, which is worth 10 points. And similarly to pom, jazz, and hip hop, we are accrediting communication and projection by the dancers in your high kick routine. Do they connect with the audience and provoke an appropriate emotional response for whatever piece of music and style of kick choreography you've selected? And does the performance have an authentic feel? So now it's time to wrap up this scoring webinar. I hope that this detailed breakdown of our score sheets, as well as spending time going over our overall philosophy and some specific key points that we focus on in our judging, has been helpful to you. We really appreciate your business at DTU, and since we're a relatively new company, we are really looking for your feedback as you move through your season and you attend our competitions, as to questions you have or changes you'd like us to consider. We have open ears and are always willing and ready to listen. So just some final thoughts. Every year we spend time at the end of the year recapping within the company how things went, whether we want to make any changes to the judging for the following year. As I mentioned earlier, we did this at the end of last year and made the decision to slightly change how we're describing the showmanship score to make sure that the appreciation for the choreography was not bleeding into showmanship. That resulted in that change for this year. So as you come to more DTU competitions and you have suggestions, don't be shy about telling us what you think, because we will definitely discuss it and take it into consideration in making decisions for future years. We want DTU to provide your team with the best feedback of any dance competition company. We really feel like that is, potentially the most important thing to dance teams out there, is that you all work hard and you have a long season and you want to continue to improve, not just competition to competition, but year over year. And we hope to provide you with feedback through our scoring system and through our video critiques that provides you the level of feedback that you need to keep improving and to really continue to challenge yourselves to get better. We aim to provide an environment where teams can find their unique voice and challenge themselves year over year to be better. And I will specifically emphasize finding your unique voice. In each of the score sheets that we discussed, we focused the 10 points in artistry on, seeing if a team is bringing something signature, seeing if a team seems to be expressing its own unique voice, bringing choreography that surprises us. That really is a key focus. It is 10 points on the score sheet, but it's an area in which we think that there's a lot of opportunity for teams to earn points. So make sure that you really take risks, find your unique voice, and bring us something every year, and even between competitions that is a little bit different, that shows off your team's strengths and your team's signature style. We love that. So finally, I just want to thank you for your time and thank you for your business, for coming to DTU and having interest in us and what we have to offer. I wish you a great competition season. We're so excited to see you at our remaining competitions and hopefully at our national championship and or our college classic. And if you have any further questions, you can contact our office using our website, and we are happy to listen to you. Thank you so much.